Good Wednesday morning of the 6th week. This is, again, the story of the Acts of the Apostles, but this is an interesting story. It's Paul's failure. He preaches to the people of Athens, and they invented the line, "Don't call us, we'll call you." He fails, and yet the seed got planted in Athens. But Paul is not successful. He moves on. I'll read it to you. I don't want to overinterpret it. After Paul's escorts had taken him to Athens, remember, that's the center of culture and learning in Western civilization. Their center. If anybody should have been prepared for the gospel, it should have been the Athenians. No way. They reject it. This is the home, Athens, the home of Plato and Aristotle, Socrates. Western culture, you cannot tell the story of the West without telling the story of Athens. The great story of Jerusalem, Athens, and Rome. You want to know where you came from? Those three places. The faith comes out of Rome. It comes out of Jerusalem. The philosophy and science comes out of Greece. Roman law and the civilization, law comes out of Rome. Governance, that's what the word I'm looking for. Global governance, not chieftains, global empire. See? You want to know who we are? You got to look at those three places. Anyway, Paul stood up at the Areopagus, that's the center, okay, and said, "You Athenians, I see that in every respect you are very religious. For as I walked around looking carefully at your shrines, I even discovered an altar just inscribed to the unknown God. What therefore you unknowingly worship, I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and all that is in it," creation account, you see, "the Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in the sanctuaries made by human hands, nor is he served by human hands because he needs anything. Rather it is he who gives to everyone life and breath and everything. He made from one the whole human race to dwell on the entire surface of the earth, and he fixed the ordered seasons and boundaries of their regions so that people might seek God, even perhaps grope for him and find him, though indeed he's not far from any one of us." Now this is a line he says, now this comes right out of that culture. He is giving them, it's the Neoplatonic culture, and he's given it to them. He now Christianizes it in his speaking. Watch what he says. "For in him we live and move and have our being, as some of your poets have said, or philosophers. For we too are his offspring. In him we live and move and have our being." So he's using the wisdom, the poetry, and the philosophy of that time. Okay? "Since therefore we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the divinity is like an image, fashioned from gold, silver, and stone by human art and imagination. God has overlooked the times of ignorance, but now he demands that all people everywhere repent, because he has established a day on which he will judge the world with justice through a man he has appointed," that's Christ, "and he has provided confirmation for all by raising him from the dead." That is a great line, by raising him from the dead. When they heard about the resurrection of the dead, some began to scoff, but others said, we should like to hear a little bit more of you about at some other time. Don't call us, we'll call you. See? And so Paul left them. But some did join him and became believers. Among them was Dionysius, a member of the court of the Areopagus, a woman named Damaris, and others with them. After he left Athens, he went to Corinth. So they scoffed at him, but some lift. You have to understand that our distinction between the soul and the body, that does not come from the Jews, it comes from the Greeks. It goes back to Plato, in which the mind is the soul, and it's separate from the body. It is not identical with the body. And it's the center of our identity and our thought. Okay? That's extremely important. And so even in Plato's, in the early writings of Plato, he emphasizes the existence of the soul after death when it could be in the presence of what he calls the ideas, free of the body. That he called it that befouled mixture of body and mind, you see? So when you're talking to the Greeks, when Paul is talking to the Greeks, he says, we want to resurrect the body. The guys say, what, are you kidding me? I'm trying to get rid of it. And you see that in the old, I'll give you something else, where the church bought into that separation in the body. You see it in extremes of some forms of monasticism and monastic culture, where there is a very, very harsh treatment of the body. I can't say that among our Passionists, but there is austerity. Some austerity, as in athleticism, is natural. It's good. An athlete, for instance, doing push-ups. See? Get it? Some austerity is very good. But when it's an extreme and it denigrates the beauty of the body, then it's foul. And there are times in monastic tradition it has followed that tradition, because they're not looking at the gospel, they're looking at the Greeks, to separate, and especially Neoplatonism or Platonism, the extreme contrast between soul and body, see, in which we seek to save the soul, and we want to contain and, as it were, constrain the body, push the body aside. Boy, you see it in extreme monasticism at times. When the monks went out into the desert, there's an austerity in some forms of Christian piety that sees a radical separation of soul and body. When I was growing up as kids, we'd hear that a lot. Save your soul. No, you save the person, not the soul. See? This gets very, very tricky. Christianity, because it's marriage to Greek philosophy, especially Neoplatonic philosophy, Platonism, has always run the risk of a form of dualism where we save the soul and disdain the body, and especially among the monks. Extreme asceticism from really the 2nd, 3rd century on. See, that influence, that's not biblical. That's, in a sense, it's Greco. It comes out of Greece. It comes out of specifically Neoplatonism or Platonism in its extreme form. Anyway, that's, I think, is a very important, because those of you that are old like me would have heard that kind of stark distinction growing up. Why we fasted, why we did this, so many punishments of the body, even among the laity, but especially among the religious. Austerity, wearing habits that are painful to wear, wool, many ways of austere living. In a sense, not to free the soul as much as it is to punish the body. That the church has condemned it from day one and yet practiced it, especially the monks. And I think some religious nuns, extreme form of asceticism. In a sense, it creeps into a disdain of the earth, a disdain of the world, a disdain of the body. There's a saying in the monastery, fuga mundi, flee the world. Well, the world in the biblical sense is all the forces of evil. It's not the world. See, it's not the world. It's not the earth. Fuga mundi, flee the world. Flee humanity? How are you going to flee humanity? See? So many things were taken to such an extreme. I'm so grateful for the Second Vatican Council, because that was profoundly humanistic in its orientation and biblical. I think it recovered us from a piety that was self-destructive, in my opinion, my 2 cents. Namely, that negative austerity, at least as practiced in the early 20th century, as I experienced it. But I know I'm not alone. I'm not alone. It was practiced throughout monasticism and convent life, but it was also preached. A tremendous emphasis on the salvation of the soul and the condemnation of the body. The fear of emotion, the fear of bodiliness. It was a dualism, a radical dualism. That's not Christianity. That's this form of Greek philosophy, and it's an extreme form of Neoplatonism, actually, not Aristotle. Aristotle saw the virtues of the body. And the extreme form of Platonism is a separation of the two. And that's the part that caught on. Anyway, those of you who are old like me have to probably remember what we were taught in catechism, what we were taught in Sunday school, or what we were taught in our Catholic schools. When? 70 years ago, 70, 80 years ago. You got to be old for this stuff. But it was as real could be at that time. The Vatican Council transformed all that because it preached not Neoplatonism or Platonism, it preached the gospel.